The prime thing is you have to win.
There you go. There you go. That's what I'm talking about. Hey, Mark, settle down a little bit.
All right, welcome back to the Just Win podcast. I'm your host, Ted Nguyen. That's my co-host, Marshall Newhouse. And it's been a week since we talked, and there's been some movements with the coaches. But we thought it'd be a great idea to get Amy Trask on, talk about the organization as a whole, how it's being restructured, and get her thoughts on things. So we'll start that. We'll start that interview here in a second, and then afterwards we'll kind of update or give you guys an update on the Raiders coaching search. All right, we want to welcome Amy Trask, the Princess of Darkness, onto the Just Win podcast. You are our first official guest since me and Marshall have gotten together on this podcast. So that you should feel honored. First get.
I am honored. I am deeply and truly honored. I am delighted. I'll use my mom's word, which she used when just a simple wow wasn't enough, and I will say wowie. Thank you. I am honored.
Yeah, I figured I had to make this happen in some kind of way, and you felt like a very natural first guest for us.
I really and truly am honored. Thank you, guys.
Of course.
Yeah. But I thought it's a great time to have you on. The Raiders are going through a lot of changes, like always, but I think not just coaching changes, but from an organizational standpoint, they're going through changes that are pretty unique. So great to have you on. We'll ask you some questions. Marshall, why don't you start?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think there are still some people who aren't sure exactly how important you are to the modern Raiders team and organization. So give us a little background on you joining as an intern and your non-football operations role, and kind of set the tone for how you handled the Raiders in the 90s and 2000s.
Well, I fell in love with the team when I was a student at Cal Berkeley. The Raiders were really right down the road, and I loved everything about the team. You'd watch games on TV and you'd see the visiting team, the bus would roll up to the stadium and players would get out and they'd be wearing coats and carrying briefcases and walk into the game. And then you'd see the Raider bus roll up to the visit, when the Raiders were the visitor, the bus would roll up to the stadium and everyone would just tumble out wearing whatever the heck they were wearing the night before. There were no coats, there were no briefcases, and that was okay. And what really resonated with me was this was a team, the owner of which did not care if you were labeled a behavior problem. I was labeled a behavior problem in kindergarten. If that label stuck with me through high school, many people would tell you, including my whole family, it still is an appropriate label. But Al didn't care. He didn't care if other teams thought you were difficult or a behavior problem, or if you were trouble, which was a nickname given to me, by the way, when I was a kid, was trouble. And I liked everything about it. And of course, as everyone knows, Al, and this was over time, he hired Tom Flores. He then hired me. He then hired Art Shell. This is someone who hired people without regard to race, gender, religion, or any other individuality, which has no bearing whatsoever on whether one can do a job. And obviously, not only does that resonate with me, I owe my career to the fact that that is the way he conducted business. So I started as an intern. I was in grad school. I moved back home to Los Angeles the same year the team ultimately moved to LA. They had tried to move earlier, but been ordered back by court order. I came down for grad school, or came home for grad school, same year the team came down. And when I was in grad school, I was listening to people a year or two ahead of me talking about these things called internships and externships. And I thought, that sounds interesting. And I picked up the phone and I called the Raiders and said, I'd like to be an intern. And that's when my career started.
Wow. Yeah, I think these days, there's so many different entryways into careers now, with social media and things like that. So it was cool that, I don't know how many people start their careers with just like a random phone call. Like, were you like nervous at all doing that?
And a random phone, as you said, just a phone call. And mind you, this is back in the day where we used landlines and there were receptionists. So I believe I was using a cell phone, and they were the kind that were really big. They looked like the size of shoes. And I called the Raider offices. The receptionist answered. I said, I'd like to do an internship. And she patched me through to someone. And he said, what's an intern? Very gruffly. And I said, well, I'll work for you and you won't pay me. And that was back in the days when interns were not paid. So he said, come on down. And that's how I started. And, I picked up the phone and I called.
All right. So, Raider fans, if you're listening, if you want to start a career with the Raiders, find John Spytek's number or Tom Brady's number, or start badgering them. But you said you came from Cal, and the Raiders look like they're in line to draft a former Cal quarterback in Fernando Mendoza. Where do you stand on the two school of thoughts when it comes to drafting a quarterback really high? Do you think that a team should really build the environment out first and then draft the quarterback? Or do you think if you feel like you have that guy there, draft him and then worry about the other things later? How did you feel about the JaMarcus Russell situation, and did he have the right environment around him to support him?
Well, I'll answer first as to Mendoza, and then I'll certainly address JaMarcus, because there were things going on, of which many are not aware, and I will share those not by way of excuse, because of course the pick didn't work out, but by way of some context and explanation. As to Mendoza, if the Raiders believe that Fernando is the right pick, then go get him. If you believe he's the answer, go get him. If you're at all dubious or quizzical, maybe you want to explore whether you could trade that pick for oodles and oodles and oodles of compensation, whether draft picks or players under contract with other teams, or a combination of both. If you believe Fernando Mendoza is the answer at quarterback, if he's going to solve it for you on a long-term basis, go get him, with this caveat. You've got other things to address to best position him to be his best. The Raiders gave up more sacks than any other team this season, and they rushed for fewer yards per game than any other team this season. And I certainly don't need to tell this to Marshall or to you, Ted. Games are won and lost for the most part at the line of scrimmage. If you're going to draft Fernando or bring in any quarterback, no matter who your quarterback is, you have got to address pass protection. Again, most sacks given up in the league, fewest rushing yards per game in the league. And number one, protect the quarterback. But number two, one of a quarterback's best friends is the running game, because the better you are at rushing the ball, the less the opposing defense can focus on teeing off on your quarterback, covering your receivers, going full blast after your quarterback, because you've got to defend the run. So you drafted a running back first last year. Address the offensive line, address pass protection, address run blocking, because protecting your quarterback and running the ball are going to help Fernando or anyone else under center. As to JaMarcus, look, it did not work out, period, full stop. What I share now, I don't share by way of excuse or explanation, but some context. Between his rookie year and his next year, he experienced something in his life very, very, very tragic. And I think it yanked the footing out from underneath him and had a tremendous, tremendous impact on him. And I share that because, players are human beings. And often, and by the way, the same thing with actors and anyone else that the public views in a public role. We see what's going on publicly, but there's often things going on behind the scenes. And again, I offer that not by way of excuse. The pick did not work. We all know that. But he really experienced some tragic things after that rookie year that I believe impacted his ability to grow and develop.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, because I harp all the time how much context matters. The players aren't drafted and they don't perform in a vacuum. Obviously, this is, to me, the ultimate team sport. The QB is the most important position in that sport, but you have no clue, talking to fans, that the royal we have no clue what someone's going through, and having the foundation organizationally and stability and support to help players in those moments is just as vital as the pick itself. So I really appreciate you sharing that story. And earlier I was grinning just because all season, all I've been saying is, okay, if the Raiders and the front office, and we'll talk about the structure, the current structure of the front office and how decisions are made and how they're thinking about this long term. But as a collective, if they believe that Fernando Mendoza is the guy, then that first overall pick was very important, and they have it, and they should use it with the added context of, yes, building out the rest of this roster because there are legitimate holes. They have a lot of cap space. They have some guys I think they can retain who are really good players moving forward. But that there's got to be conviction. There's got to be a buy-in about rowing in the right direction if you're going to pick a guy that important first overall. But it is not, to me, a failure. There's a lot of fans who give us feedback, and they're just like, we've struggled without a legitimate QB1, maybe since Derek Carr, but even before that, a high draft pick for so long that they say, take the QB number one no matter what. And I'm just trying to let you know that it is not a foregone conclusion that Fernando Mendoza will be the savior of this franchise. There are too many variables at play, and you have got to build the team and the philosophy around what he does best, and then whatever the rest of the team, how it fills out. And so it's great to hear you say that. I'll get to a question at some point, but I had to reiterate just how important that is for people to understand. I get the emotion that is involved in this Raiders organization. There's so much pride, so much buy-in from fans, but there are multiple paths. I mean, there's a fork in the road. The Raiders have to pick, but you've got to be in agreement, not full agreement, but like logically on board with the pick so that we can all support that player and that regime to the utmost. And so I appreciate you sharing that.
Well, and I appreciate everything you just said, and I will revert to my law school days and say, I concur, co-counsel. I wish I could jump through the screen and give you a hug because so many of the points you made are so, so, so important. One in particular leapt out at me, and that's when I wanted to dive through the screen and hug you, although I agree with everything you said, which is the best coaches best position their players to be their best. They don't take a player who is well suited to play in X sort of offense, or it can be defense, and ask them to play in another scheme. They don't cram players into schemes for which they're not well suited. They look at the player and say, what does this player do best? And how do I build a scheme around him to best position him to be his best? So I agree with that point that you made. And again, irrespective of who is under center, and yes, I realize Mendoza spends a lot of time in shotgun, but when I talk about, I hear up with the Raiders working for Al Davis. When I talk about a quarterback, I talk about under center. Irrespective of who is under center, you got to protect him. You cannot give up the most sacks in the league and expect your quarterback to succeed. You cannot have the fewest rushing yards per game and leave your quarterback to play in that environment. The other thing I will note is a lot of fans don't realize how young players are when they are drafted. We drafted at times men who were not yet 21. Now they turned 21 perhaps fairly shortly thereafter, but 20 years old, 21 years old, raise your hand if when you were 20 or 21, you didn't know what the heck you were doing in a lot of respects. And for, my hands are both up. But the other thing I remember is we drafted a player and he was in tears because he lived, 3,000 miles away. He went to college near where he grew up. And he didn't want to come 3,000 miles across the country. And yes, I understand people will say, but Amy, they're paid millions and millions of dollars. I get it. I'm the one that signed the check. I know. And other people have to move far for a job that is far less lucrative. But the fact is, these are human beings, and some of them are very nervous about moving across the country.
I like to look at these decisions and team building decisions. And I found throughout the years, obviously, offensive line is one of the greatest gifts you can give a quarterback. But I find the thing that I put number one is a great play caller. A great play caller could, help mitigate some issues with the offensive line and things like that. But I want to say, I want to make it clear. Number 2 is offensive line, but I just feel like number 1, a great play caller, really helps out a young quarterback. And obviously, the Raiders are trying to make a decision right now to who's going to be a head coach. And I found it pretty interesting that Mark Davis or at least they're saying that he's taking a back seat when he's making this decision. Knowing what do you think that Mark Davis is really taking a complete back seat when they're making this huge John Spytek and Tom Brady is making this huge decision?
Well, before I answer that, I will just tell you as to the play caller and as to the offensive line and as to the running game, what's that meme we all see? Why not both? But I will say, as to the offensive line, you and I are going to, and you're right. I mean, you need a good play caller. Again, you need someone who understands what these players are best suited to do. But let me tell you this, if I'm a quarterback and I have an opportunity to play behind Gene Upshaw and Art Shell, give me them, okay? And this is something I say about every single team, not just the Raiders. I said it on CBS Sports HQ yesterday with respect to Terry Pagula. So I'll make very, very clear this is something I believe about every single team owner and every controlling owner of every business. When you are the controlling owner, you have full authority and full responsibility. Now, you can delegate that authority to others. You can delegate that responsibility to others, but you can ultimately take that authority and that responsibility back, which is my point. Ultimate authority and ultimate responsibility rests with ownership. And they can and they do take varying roles. You've got some owners who say to their general managers, run it. You've got other owners who are sitting in the draft room saying, what about that guy? And why aren't we doing that guy? I certainly believe about Mark Davis that he wants to do what is absolutely the best for the team. And if he believes the answers are Tom and John, then that's what he will do. But as to every single owner, if they change their minds, they can take that control back.
Yeah, that's such an important point. I mean, the NFL is what it is as an entity. There are, a limited amount of owners, and they are truly don't answer to anyone but themselves. And we see this. I went through 2 CBA negotiations. We see this when they're on the other side of the table, but then you see this within the organization that, I think fans ultimately, I understand the will and the desire for just, you want things to just work right. And you're like, why don't they run it like this and like this? Well, for a lot of these owners, some more than others, this is a quote unquote toy, for lack of a better term. This is their venture that they get to choose to do with what they like. And some of them want to be more involved, a la Jerry Jones, and some are more laissez-faire, hands off. But they have to, they reserve the right to do what they please. And so I wanted to kind of get your thoughts as best you can on the specific minority ownership of Tom Brady and the partnership with John Spytek, and how you feel that dynamic is best suited for the Raiders moving forward, given that Tom Brady is still under contract to broadcast for Fox. And, we see him on the sidelines of the national championship game, but that can't be all year round. He's going to be in the booth. He has another job. Tell me how you feel about when that was announced and how that's come to be, because as Ted and I have talked about in the show week after week, it's felt disjointed from the front office and the last coach in Pete Carroll in the decisions that were made and the how they are moving forward. So how do you see that partnership as they try to build this team?
Well, before I dive into that, I just want to reference something you mentioned, which is the collective bargaining agreement and the relationship between the NFLPA and the NFL. And I'm going to pitch an idea to you. You're going to throw your hat in the ring, Marshall. They need a new executive director. You're going to throw that hat of yours in the ring and say to the NFLPA, let me come in there and help you fix it.
I know where my bread is butter. Listen, I tried to be a rep. I played on a lot of different teams, and
I know.
actually I didn't have a lot of staying power, and so there was just a political aspect to me not getting as involved as I liked. But I always paid attention. I was always an extra, and I always made sure that I knew what was going on, even if I wasn't elected, if you will, to governance. But listen, I don't know if that's in the cards for me, but I definitely I feel for players of the past, present, and future, and I want what's best for them.
Well,
You're gonna make me lose my podcast host.
I'm sorry, what did you say, Ted?
You're gonna make me lose my podcast host.
Sorry about that. But look, I certainly followed your career, Marsh. Well aware of where you played. And by the way, I remember going to Green Bay. I think it was 2011. And I see you nodding. What was it like? 46-16 or something like
It was not close. It was not close.
Yeah, okay. So yes, I followed your career closely, and look, I will get to your question, but the NFLPA needs some real leadership who understands how to best represent the players, and I don't think that's been the case since we lost Gene Upshaw, since he passed away.
Yeah.
Okay, as to your question, I think the four most important words in business, not just football, but in business, are communicate, cooperate, collaborate, and coordinate. And that's what the Raiders need to do internally. Look, there are a lot of people who are quizzical and they say, oh, well, Amy must not like Tom Brady because of the tuck rule. That is absolutely untrue. I have no ill will whatsoever towards Tom. Tom Brady did in that moment, in that game, exactly what every single fan wants the quarterback of their team to do in that moment. Tom did absolutely nothing improper. He did what fans want their quarterback to do. Now, if we want to talk about the officials, that's a different story. But, all teasing aside, we don't want to go down that path. I note that because I bear no ill will whatsoever to Tom for that game. None. So, look, he's involved. You noted that he wears multiple hats. It's not just broadcasting, but, we turn on the TV, we see he's doing commercials for pizza, I think it is.
Yeah.
He's going to Saudi Arabia for a game of some sort. So he's wearing a lot of hats. But do I think he can contribute to the Raiders? Yes, I do. But they've got to clear out the lack of communication within the organization. To use an old saying, everybody in the boat needs to be pulling their oars in the same direction. And the communication needs to be open and clear. Tom is not the only one involved. I've mentioned this on other platforms, so I'm not breaking any news or sharing anything I didn't share. But the gentleman who orchestrated Tom's purchase of the Raiders, Jim Gray, is still very involved behind the scenes. And I'm not suggesting he's making decisions on draft picks. I'm not suggesting he's deciding, on third down, do we run or do we throw? Nothing of the sort. But he's got a heavy imprint on that organization. And my concern for any organization, if you're going to be involved, roll up your sleeves, be there, communicate, collaborate, coordinate, cooperate, and do it openly and create an environment in the organization where everybody I'm repeating it, but you want everyone in the organization to collaborate. You don't want anyone working in the shadows. You don't want things going on behind the scenes. That's got to be addressed. And I therefore hope whoever is picked, now you got to help me. Is it whoever or whomever? I think it's whomever.
Ted, you're the you're the writer.
Oh man, I'm a writer that is an expert in typos. So
okay, well, I think I got it right. And I'm the weirdo that, like, if I ever end a sentence with you in a preposition, I'm going to stop myself and fix it. And by the way, kids today who tell me, oh, Amy, punctuation is so out. We don't punctuate. Punctuation is aggressive. No, punctuation is not aggressive. And I'm going to go to my grave punctuating. So with that footnote aside, you need an organization in which everyone who's involved there's no skulking around behind the scenes. Everybody needs to communicate, and it needs to be open, and everybody needs to be involved. You need to fix the environment internally. And by the way, that's why I think, and this is where I got goofed up on my grammar, the next head coach really needs to be a strong leader. You can go get a phenomenal offensive coordinator. You can go get a phenomenal defensive coordinator. Your head coach needs to have tremendous leadership skills.
Yeah, misalignment was a big issue for this team last year as far as what Pete Carroll wanted, what John Spytek wanted with playing some of the young players, and Pete Carroll not doing that until late in the year. So alignment definitely is an issue, and I think a lot of people in Raider Nation kind of want to know a little bit more about Jim Gray. Can you kind of tell us about who he is and do you have any examples of maybe, the type of pull he has in an organization?
I'm not going to offer any of. Here's what I will offer. When I was with the organization, before I left, Jim worked to orchestrate the purchase of a minority interest in the team, and for any number of reasons, I had to let him know that wasn't going to work. So, he's been wanting to orchestrate the purchase of an interest in the team for quite a while, and he's the one who connected Tom and Mark. And, my hope for Raider Nation is that they all work together, and there's no, as I said, skulking around. You've got to fix the environment there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it needs to be fertile because, listen, the Raiders, as we'll talk about more on the field, they have a lot of holes. They have, I think a lot of misfit pieces that were there last year, felt like temporary ads and free agency, and some guys who were, I think, have potential talented rookies or second-year players who I think weren't being used right or being given chances to just get some reps and get some calluses in game. And so you're absolutely right that there has to just be unity and a level of cooperation with the Raiders organization moving forward. I have a question. This is kind of another broader question about your personal feelings about how the franchise sits at this place, having moved from Oakland to Las Vegas. I haven't been to a Raiders game yet. I'll have to fix that. But I was just in the stadium to call a bowl game this past fall. But I got me thinking about I was the second to last season in the Black Hole in Alameda Coliseum, and it's just a special place, unique unto itself. But I understand there's a lot more things at play. But tell me your thoughts about when that was announced and how that went down as best as you can. And then moving forward, how the Raiders continue to cultivate a home field advantage in a place where Raider fans from all over the place can come and feel like it's their home.
I'm going to answer every one of those questions because I think they're phenomenal questions. But I will note one thing. I keep repeating the words communicate, cooperate, coordinate, collaborate. But I want to note that doesn't mean everybody has to always agree. Disagreement is good. Disagreement can be healthy. Disagreement can make businesses better. So I'm not suggesting there can't be disagreement, but it has to be healthy, productive disagreement designed to advance the interests of the organization. But I'm a big believer in healthy, productive disagreement. I think it makes businesses better. As to your questions, I had, when the move was announced, mixed emotions. I still do, and I'll explain it this way. A, the stadium in Las Vegas is magnificent. No ifs, ands, or buts. It's a magnificent, magnificent stadium. But I was, when I learned of it, not surprised by the move. I saw that writing on the wall, and it's one of the reasons I chose to leave, meaning I believed that the ultimate decision was going to be to move the team. And I guess I saw that writing on the wall, and that was one of the reasons I chose to leave. It is an absolutely magnificent stadium, period, full stop, no ifs, ands, or buts. But for those fans in the Bay Area who are heartbroken that the team left, my heart breaks for them. For the fans that are thrilled with the new stadium and thrilled that the team is in Las Vegas and who travel to the games, so it matters not to them, for example, are they flying from Los Angeles to the Bay Area, or are they flying or driving from Los Angeles to Las Vegas? For those fans who've embraced the move, I'm thrilled for them. And it's not mutually exclusive to feel terribly for the fans whose hearts are broken and be happy for the fans who are happy. But it really should not have come as any sort of surprise to the team that there would be a lot of visiting team fans in the stadium. I said this on CBS at the time of the move when I was asked to comment, which is, if you are a fan of another team and you can go to only one road game in a season, a lot of people are going to pick Vegas. If you're a fan of a team that's, let's say you're a Chiefs fan or any team fan, Bronco fan, and you can go to one game away from home. Well, we all saw Vegas Vacation, didn't we? I did.
Yes.
So, it doesn't surprise. Did a cat just jump? There's a cat.
There we go.
They had a cat.
Hey.
It doesn't surprise me that there's visiting team fans there. Here's what I think the Raiders should do to address that. Take care of your fans. Fans are not only to be appreciated, they are to be cherished. Take your fans, divide them into groups. You've got season ticket holders, you've got individual game ticket holders, you've got club seat holders, you've got suite holders. Give them experiential opportunities at every single game. I know you're not going to be able to do every fan at every game. Perhaps do a lottery, do a drawing, and X number of fans are going to get to go on the field pregame. X number of fans are going to get to go to a meet and greet after the game to meet players and coaches. See, the cat left. The cat, that's like, I've had enough, Aim. Give your fans discounts on food and beverage. And when I say your fans, yeah, I'm talking only Raider fans. Visiting team fans can pay full price for food and beverage. Visiting team fans don't get to go on the sideline or take a tour of the locker room after the game or go to a meet and greet. Take care of Raider fans.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that's one area where they could definitely step it up and, offer a unique experience. You're really trying to build that fan base there. And I know they've made a lot of money, but there just hasn't been that, support in Vegas just yet. But yeah, we really appreciate that your time here. We've taken up enough of your time, about 30 minutes already. So really grateful to you. And I'm sure our listeners will just eat the stuff up.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm laughing because obviously I talk so much that even the cat was tired and left while I was talking. But I will say one more thing about fans. I shall always and forever appreciate Raider fans, and I shall always and forever wish and hope for them the very, very best. When I joined the Raiders as an intern, it was in the early part of the mid-'80s, and I joined full-time in the mid-'80s. And I realized from day one how special the fans are. There's no league as we know it without fans. And the Raider fans reached out and embraced me, and I embraced them back. And I will always and forever want what's best for them.
Well, yeah, I couldn't agree more. Listen, I hope people continue to lean into the vital role that you played in the growth and the history of this team and your importance involved in that. And again, as Ted said, we're so grateful for your time. And listen, you couldn't talk enough. We're going to have you back as we kind of continue to build this thing and give Raiders fans a little bit of behind the scenes peek and some insider knowledge.
I would love to do that. And thank you for having me. And I'm a big fan of both of yours.
Same here. Thank you so much.
All right, the great Amy Trask. Glad to have Amy on, and she gave us a ton of her time. But let's talk about the Raiders coaching search. As of right now, the Bills were added to the coaching search. They fired Sean McDermott, so there's another opening for the Raiders to compete with. Since we've talked, Jesse Minter has been hired by the Baltimore Ravens, and Jordan Schultz reported that the Raiders were in with Jesse Minter and tried to work with them till the end before he ultimately chose the Baltimore Ravens. So I think where that leaves the Raiders at right now, I thought they would have more interest in Chris Shula, but maybe they're still waiting to interview him. But he seems like it just seems like Pittsburgh's a natural fit for him, and it seems like the Raiders are intent in going with an offensive mind. So that leaves Kubiak, who is still coaching the Seahawks as they are going to play in the NFC Championship. Mike McDaniel, who did commit to be the Chargers offensive coordinator, but he's still open to a head coaching gig. And I think if the Raiders offer him, he's going to take the job. He interviewed with the Bills this morning too, so the Raiders might have a little competition in that front. But it doesn't seem like the Raiders are quick to pull the trigger. Again, they're still waiting on some guys in the playoffs. And Davis Webb, who really does not have a lot of experience at all, but is seen as a guy that is up and coming in this league, and you would have to hire him maybe a year or two early, or else he's going to be the hottest name in the market in a year or two. So, Marshall, what are your thoughts on the coaching search so far?
Well, listen, I understand the Raiders kind of doing their due diligence. That's what this is for. They're having interviews, and I'm not to give credit just for credit's sake, but it's a wide net. And so you've seen some defensive coaches, you've seen some older, more experienced coaches, and you've seen the likes of a Davis Webb, who I understand the temptation to want to maybe get in early on buy low on the stock before he's really proven himself. But I just think there is such a thing as not enough experience, because this is not an offensive coordinator position. This is a head coach. And as Amy Trask just told us, so much of this is just the leadership of men, and actually being kind of not that he's this person or any coach would be a CEO type, but you are in charge of so many things as a head coach. Even if you're the play caller on offense and defense, you're in charge of so many things. And the jump from Davis Webb, who we've seen in the hip pocket of Sean Payton, who we've seen help Bo Nix this season, but he's not far removed from being a backup quarterback for the New York Giants. And so there's a lot to me before he's ready. Now, I like him. I think that I understand the temptation, but to me, that's just for such an important hire right now for the Raiders. To me, that's a tough one to justify. Unless, listen, Tom Brady and Spytek have just an incredible amount of behind the scenes situational information that the rest of us don't have, which might be true. Clint Kubiak is still coaching right now, but I think the Raiders, as they've already interviewed him once, will receive the opportunity for a second interview, and so that'll be huge. And I still think he would be a good hire. And we've talked about his demeanor and approach as a head coach, but I still think he would be a very good hire. The mentor in the Schuler, potential mentor, came from Baltimore. That makes a lot of sense. I would have been in love with that, but it just didn't work out. And Shula, again, would have loved that. But I understand that fit is everything, and you want a coach who feels at home with the Raiders and who understands the prospects of what they're trying to build. And so, is Mike McDaniels that guy? Does he need a year to kind of just be a play caller again? I'm not sure, but I think a lot of people see him as maybe not the entire failure of Miami as being his fault, and maybe they see him as someone who can kind of be redeemed here in a situation. So, but again, the Raiders they're doing their diligence. Tom Brady's involved. They're having people in for interviews, and they're casting a wide net. So that's as good as you can hope for. And then ultimately, when they pull the trigger, it's got to make sense whether they've decided to take Fernando Mendoza or whether they ultimately decide to load up and build the depth of this team.
Yeah, I think, and also a bit of news: Mendoza has declared for the draft. I think most people assumed he would, but there's always that slight chance he might not.
Sure.
That would leave the Raiders in a pretty bad spot. So he declared for the draft. His LinkedIn profile has been updated as he's looking for work. So
Some B2B sales information, yeah.
it was hilarious when he shut down all his social medias and the only thing left was his LinkedIn. But he will enter the draft. I think he understands what's going to happen. I think the Raiders have been telegraphing what's going to happen. You saw Tom Brady, John Spytek, and Mark Davis on the sideline of that national championship game, in which I thought was a good look at Mendoza because, like we seen him in all these games where they were ahead and he could kind of just, he wasn't pressured, but this was a game that was a little bit messy. Indiana was ahead for this game, but it was a close game. And, I just felt like he stood in there, took some big hits. That was a strong pass rush that the Miami.
He got knocked around. That was, to me, the zone read that he gave and got hit, which was a penalty. But just the fact that he popped back up, he was wearing those bruises and scars like a badge of honor. Obviously, football is a grown man's. It's a tough sport. And, you would assume that most football players, that's kind of like par for the course, but that is not just any quarterback's makeup, is to be able to take a hit like that and other hits and to keep delivering some of these wide side out throws, back shoulder throws, running the football with toughness. So he showed a lot in front of the leadership for the Raiders there on the biggest stage on the way to national championship.
Yeah, in the first quarter, he was faking a zone read, and one of the Miami defenders stuck a helmet right in his chin. Lip was bleeding, and he didn't falter. One of the biggest plays of the game, 4th and 5. They called a quarterback draw on 4th and 5, and he ran it like a running back. It was open, but he had to make a cut back and cut across the grain, and then truck 2 guys into the end zone. I mean, that's impressive. So it was a good game by him. And it seems like the Raiders are heading towards a direction where they're trying to find a play caller to match with them.
Mhm.
And right now, the two proven play callers that are available, Clint Kubiak and Mike McDaniel. I think I would give Mike McDaniel a little bit of an edge just because I think he's so creative in everything he does. And we've seen him scheme up an explosive run game with the Dolphins with not a lot of offensive line talent. So I think that is pretty attractive for the Raiders to pair with Mendoza. But I think the big question with him is the whole leader of men question, which I think is fair. He doesn't look like a typical coach. He wears capris. He kind of talks in like a podcasty type of way. But I think he actually impressed me this year with how hard the Dolphins played this year throughout the year. Even though they started the season really bad, Tua was regressing a lot. I felt like the team played really hard for him. So that impressed me a little bit. And he has head coach experience. So he can learn from his mistakes. He understands what the job entails. I think the, you know, I think the Raiders are still waiting. They're not totally sure yet, or else they probably would have offered by now. But what do you think about the whole McDaniel persona? Like, do you think he can be a head coach?
Yeah, I definitely think he can be a head coach. He's not for everyone, though. That's okay. I was always told when you're coming out for the draft, all you need is one team to believe in you and like you. And um, you know, there were a lot of reports just because they weren't winning about the dynamics within the building. And was he too light? Was he too much of a player's coach and too laid back and cool and all of that? But as you said, they started off really poorly this season, and we're undermanned, had some injuries, and just not great stellar quarterback play at times. We're just a really mercurial team, but then you saw them really put their foot down and play tough football games towards the end. And obviously that to me is the bare minimum, but it says something about we felt like it was trending in a really, really poor direction. He ultimately did get fired, but something to speaking to grown men and getting them to react and fight in that situation, to me, says a lot about his level of resiliency. And I think, again, having had that experience, there will be a whole list of things where he's like, I'm not doing that again. Or like, I learned from that mistake and it'll be fixed, worthy to be hired again as a head coach. And the Raiders, listen, again, I'll go back to Amy Trask. She understands that the history of Al Davis was picking outliers, picking people who weren't perfect, polished candidates. And if the Raiders were in line with that, I think Mike McDaniels is that type of guy. Is he a swashbuckling tough guy? No, not necessarily, but he is a different kind of coach than what most people are used to. And I think that will be right up their alley as a way to find success where other people aren't necessarily looking. And so much of this has to do with their intentions with Fernando Mendoza and what they want this thing to look like, not just a year or two from now, but hopefully 5 years from now. But again, I would also be very happy with Clint Kubiak. So if these are the two of a small amount of final candidates, I think the Raiders are in a good position. But we got to see how things shake out. There's still playoff games to be played. Other teams are now jockeying for these coaches as well.
Yeah. Another name, Clint Kubiak. We've talked about he's a quiet guy. That doesn't necessarily mean is a red flag or he can't coach, but I think that's just his demeanor. I think as a play caller, I think the one concern was, can he build out a good run game? Because the Seahawks struggled to run the ball throughout the year, but they've really gotten a lot better at running the ball at the end of the season and into the playoffs. And it's one of the reasons why they're winning games. They've been able to kind of keep the ball or the weight of the whole offense off of Sam Darnold's shoulders. So that has been impressive. And yeah, I mean, out of those names, like you mentioned, Webb is just too big of a gamble, I think, at this point of the year. I think he will be a head coach at some point, but I think this franchise has been through too much and have too much to lose on at this point of their rebuild, unless they feel like they're just blown away by
That's the type of gamble in a hire that you make if you are coming off of maybe like the Ravens or the Steelers, so much success and consistency that, hey, we can take a chance on a guy who doesn't on paper check every single box, obviously, but the Raiders, having had so much turnover since 2000, really, and so much just lack of success, I think this has got to be a more established hire.
Yeah, and another name they might possibly be looking out for is maybe Vance Joseph. Maybe they're looking at Vance Joseph as head coach and Davis Webb come with him as an offensive coordinator. Vance Joseph has had head coaching experience before, and obviously leading one of the best defenses in the whole league this season. So we'll see. I think we'll have a lot more news for you guys and more things to discuss after the championship rounds.
Mhm.
And we'll see if the Raiders choose a coach. But I think that's the list of guys that I think the Raiders will choose from now. But yeah, I mean, I really appreciate Marshall getting Amy on. I thought that was great stuff. And we will talk to you guys later.
Appreciate you guys. Thank you.